If you're listening to me and you're in your 20s or less, there's a 1 in 2 chance, 50% chance that you're going to live through another pandemic at the same level of COVID-19. If you're older than that, there's still a 20 to 30% chance that in the next 10 years, you're going to live through another COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 is the deadliest pestilence in human history, maybe the exception of the Spanish flu, with 28 million people dead and almost 1 billion infections, more than 700 million infections. So it's important to understand the origins of COVID-19. And COVID-19 was caused by an emerging pathogen. So that means a new microbe that was not known before that time. There were other similar pathogens, but not exactly COVID-19. So 75% of these new pathogens, these emerging pathogens, are zoonotic. They come from contact with animals. And so why is it predicted that there's such a high likelihood that you and I are going to live through another pandemic? Well, there are human reasons and there are viral reasons. So with increasing urbanization, there's a large number of people living in a small space. So there's congestion and there's a dense population. That's perfect for transmission of diseases. Urbanization is thought to be one of the reasons why Africa did not experience the severity of the COVID-19 pandemic compared to other continents. So for example, in Kenya, only about 30 to 40% of the population are living in urban areas. But for example, in Europe, at least 70% of the population are living in urban areas. And the housing and the ventilation systems, the congestion in transport or public transport systems, and other ways in which there is congestion, creates room for these viruses to spread. The second reason is with deforestation and habitat encroachment, there's increasing contact between animals and human beings. So for example, the Ebola virus, with the deforestation, increases contact between humans and wildlife, and that provides an opportunity for pathogens to jump from animals to humans. The next reason is climate change. So as we are seeing different patterns, heavier rainfall, this also changes vector behavior. So for example, like mosquitoes that carry certain viruses like the dengue virus or the Zika virus, then with heavy rainfall, there's an increase in these vectors, and therefore you can expect that there's going to probably be an increase of the transmission of the virus in these vectors and therefore to humans. The next reason is industrial farms. So industrial farms or factory farms are where you rear a huge number of animals in a highly confined space to maximize profits. So it's very intensive farming, and as you can imagine, this increases the contact between humans and animals, and also between animals and increases the probability that viruses are going to jump from animals to humans. And that has been seen with bird flu, for example, the avian flu H5N1, which was a deadly virus that broke out in 2003 and caused a pandemic. And likewise, we see with a pig flu that originated in Mexico, also jumped from animals to humans. So I've given you 3 examples: Ebola, avian flu, COVID perhaps, and others. So we can see that this encroachment is creating excessive contact between animals and humans. The next thing is global travel. So what starts in a small corner of the world can be readily transported thousands of miles away because of global travel. And that's just provided a means for a virus to transport itself thousands of miles away, which would have been difficult in previous epochs of humanity. So the final reason is the viral reason. So a virus, most people are not even sure whether to call it a living creature, because it is simply a genetic material in a protein shell. So it has no machinery to reproduce itself. As a result, it requires a host. And this host can be anything from simple to more complex life forms. So it can infect bacteria, it can infect fungi, mycoviruses, it can infect protozoa. It can take over the machinery of any other life form, including plants and animals, even humans, to replicate itself. So what that means is that it requires a high level of adaptability and compatibility. So for it to be able to infect a human, as well as a bat, as well as a pangolin, or a mouse, or a pig, or chicken, there requires to be some kind of compatibility between that virus and the host, and even other vectors like insects. So how it does that is by changing, by mutating itself rapidly. So it goes through certain changes in its genome, in its genetics. For example, point mutation. So at one point, something just changes. Either there's an insertion or a deletion, or it can recombine. So for example, if you have two similar viruses infecting one cell, then they can kind of recombine themselves and create a new baby virus that is more infectious. And the reasons that these changes happen improve its ability to infect cells, number one, and number two, to evade detection. Animals, humans actually, have immune systems, ways of defending themselves against foreign objects or creatures. And so these viruses undergo these changes to enable them to evade immune detection that would annihilate them from the system.